Good morning, everyone. My name is Ryan Wunderlich, and today we're just going to go through some tips and tricks for 2025. This is the first one of our 2025, so we'll get started. For those of you that are new that don't know who I am, my name is Ryan Wunderlich. I've got over 38 years of experience in AutoCAD across multiple industry segments. I'm currently the support team manager here at ImagineIt for the AEC team. So if you have support with us and if it's not a manufacturing specific type question like Inventor or Vault, if it's an AutoCAD question, there's a good chance you'll get me. I have taught as a certified instructor for AutoCAD. I've got over 15 years of CAD management experience, 8 years in cruise ship building, 5 years in civil survey, landscape architecture before that. I've worked in just about every field. As I like to tell people, the only fields I haven't touched are aerospace and automotive. I've done just about everything else. Or if I haven't done it, I've at least touched it and understand what you're doing. I have a bachelor's in business management and a master's in organizational management. So with that, we're going to get started. So today's agenda, we're going to talk about some basic installation issues, typical licensing issues and problems. We're going to talk about updating graphics drivers and other graphics settings to help make AutoCAD run more efficiently. We're going to also talk about updating AutoCAD to the latest update level. And then we're going to talk about some common things to help speed up AutoCAD just in general. And this applies to AutoCAD and all verticals. So if you are using Civil 3D, if you're using AutoCAD Architecture, MEP, etc., some of these things will help. And then we're going to talk about some of the things like if the command line disappears, if file dialog boxes go missing, and some other tips, things that happen generally after you have a crash. We're going to talk about things that we can do to fix some of that. And then I've got some bonus material here for drawing maintenance and cleanup, where we're going to talk about how to go through and clean up drawings, help prevent those drawings from causing problems later on down the line. So that we'll get started with some basic installation. Yes, this webinar is being recorded, and it will be sent out and posted on ImagineIt website, and all of the PowerPoint slides are going to go to Lori as a PDF. You can reach out to Lori and she will be happy to send you the PDF slide deck. So basic installation issues. The most common errors are an installation error or an unable to install. Typically, or most often, this occurs with the web installer. This can occur with any installer deployment or a full offline installer. So some of the common reasons, we either have an unstable or slow internet connection if it's web installer. You have unstable or slow network speeds, i.e. if you're using a network hosted deployment. You may have a corrupted on-demand installation service, the ODIS install. You may have an issue with the downloads folder, especially if you are trying to do folder redirection or you're syncing to OneDrive. This causes all kinds of problems. You could have some other issues with security software and policies, such as things like antivirus, firewall, proxy, VPN, preventing ODIS from reaching out to the internet. And some Autodesk applications are being blocked by debugger keys in the Windows registry. So those are the most common things that cause your installers to fail. So if you have an unstable or slow internet connection, i.e. the web installer, opt for a full download from the Autodesk website if you're not working with deployments, if you just need it. You'll go into your product and I'll show you how we get there. You will, instead of clicking this black install button, click the little down arrow next to it and do a direct download. This will make sure that you have all of the complete installer before trying to install. If you have a corrupted ODIS install or the on-demand installation, you'll go to, hold up. Sorry, I'm a little under the weather and I don't want to cough in your ear. You go to Program Files, Autodesk AD ODIS V1. You run the ODIS, or remove ODIS EXE as administrator. You go to this link to download the latest version. Reinstall it as administrator. Try again to install the software. Issue with the downloads folder. So if you're synced to OneDrive or it's located on a network folder, so for example, somebody copies the entire installer folder over to like a network drive or SharePoint or OneDrive, anything like that, move it to a non-shared folder, i.e. I usually dump everything into C Autodesk, just to remove any of those types of things. Now when we start talking about other things like an unstable, slow network speed, security software and policies, antivirus, firewall, proxy, VPN, things like that, First thing to do is check with your IT, see what they can do to help monitor what's going on, or see if they can help determine where the blockage is coming from. Make sure you run the install with an administrator account. Right mouse click on the installer and say run as administrator. Alternatively, consult with your system admin if you do not have admin privileges. So if you're not a local admin on your system, have them log in as an admin, run the installer, and then log back in as yourself when it's complete. Sometimes we do have to disable antivirus or anti-malware software. Disconnect from VPN. If you're on VPN, your install experience is going to be miserable. I'm just going to tell you that right now. Try again to install it. So those are typically what goes wrong with basic installation issues. There's a whole host of other things that can go on, and usually we have to troubleshoot that from beginning to end till we figure out where the blockage is coming from. But these are the most common things that we run into. Any questions? Can it be installed using Intune? That is an excellent question, Brian. Yes, Intune can be used to do the install. We actually have an expert on staff that can help with Intune and help getting it set up and deployed that way. If you'd like, it does require a paid support plan or DA hours actually for that, but we have 2 guys that can help with that. So now let's go into our typical licensing issues. This is probably one that most of you have probably seen at one point or another, where you get one of the 3 common issues with licensing. You'll get a license checkout timeout, you'll get a license expired, or it'll say license manager is not functioning or improperly installed. Yes, Todd, we will distribute all the presentation slides as a PDF. I will give that to Lori when we're done. You can ping Lori and send her an email. She'll send it to you. So all of these 3 issues with licensing are all interrelated, as Autodesk is now using multiple components for named user licensing, i.e. sign-in licensing. So typically it's fixed with a little bit of work. 99% of the time, this is the easy thing to do. We go in and we run the uninstall from the ADSK licensing. We basically remove all the previous versions. Then we go to our Autodesk products. Again, I'll show you how we get here in another slide. Yes, Brian, we can do Civil 3D and any other AEC collection apps using Intune. So we go to your Autodesk account, under all products and services, locate your product and click on the view details button. In here, locate the particular year of product that you're using. And then you'll click on that. You'll go to updates, and here's where you're going to find your identity manager, which is 24 and 25, your ADSK licensing service or Autodesk licensing service. That'll be for all versions 22 through 25. And then you will see the single sign-on component. That's typically for 22 and 23. However, I do typically install that regardless. That makes sure we have all of the licensing components. Once you've done that, I typically say reboot and then see if the error goes away. Now, if the error does not go away, in other words, the issue remains, then we're looking at a larger issue that will need some technical support assistance. It could be C++ libraries, because all of those things are running off of C++. So you may have some mismatched versions or some corruption with C++. Typically, we'll blow it all away, rebuild it, see if that changes anything. In rare cases, I've seen the product information.pit file having a corruption, which means everything works except the product you just installed. Typically, that means we have to uninstall everything and reinstall from scratch after we've blown away the product information.pit file. Sometimes the Autodesk licensing service needs to be altered to run as a system service as opposed to running as a local service. Sometimes there are some URLs that need to be unblocked. Could you copy the PIT file from a working computer? Yes, but it's got to be same. So if you are only dealing with Civil 3D 24 and maybe 22, something like that, you could copy a PIT file from a working machine and replace it and see if that changes the behavior. So the URLs needed are blocked, and there's an Autodesk article that says what needs to be unblocked or it's set, and we can test that on a machine. Or you have a corrupt login state or unable to write to it. In other words, we sign out of everything, we erase that login state XML file, and then we restart and see if we can get signed in. Those are typically everything that goes wrong with licensing. Any questions on the licensing? All right. Let's talk about updating graphics drivers and other graphics settings. So long and short of it, one of the big things that I run into regularly is people are not updating their graphics drivers for their graphics card. Windows Update generally does not take care of that. So one of the things we have to do, since AutoCAD and any AutoCAD-based vertical, Civil 3D, AutoCAD architecture, are very reliant on graphics hardware, ensuring we have the latest drivers and tweaking a few things in there can really help AutoCAD run better. First thing to do is you click on the Windows Start button, type in Device Manager, comes up here, click on it. Once open, expand out Display Adapters, locate your video card, right mouse click and then select Properties. Navigate to the Driver tab, look at the driver date right here. Typically, if this is more than a few months old, I'll go to the card maker's website and get the latest driver and install that. So right now, you know, if I'm running an A1000 and I'm experiencing issues or I'm seeing some possible problems with graphics or everything just seems to be very laggy on my screen, I'll make sure to go in and update my graphics drivers and retest. Generally, NVIDIA and AMD video cards should have drivers available. Again, if you go to nvidia.com or amd.com, if you only have Intel, i.e. you're running Intel Iris or you're running Intel UHD, things like that, then you have to go to the maker of your PC. Or if you have a custom built machine, you have to go to the maker of the motherboard and see if they have an updated Intel driver package. Generally, going to the Intel website will not get you an updated driver correctly because most of the manufacturers change something, so you've got to go to them. And the big note here, never install a new graphics driver with AutoCAD open. It will crash. It will absolutely crash on you. So once you've updated the graphics driver, reopen AutoCAD, open up a blank drawing, and then type in graphics config. Now in this dialog here that comes up, we're going to talk about some settings we want to tweak. So the first thing is make sure hardware acceleration is on. In the 2D display settings, tune the caching to 4 if it's 5. Now the reason why we do this is that we don't want to try and cache everything to the video card because we give nothing else for any other programs you're running to utilize any of it. So then we start having collisions and conflicts. So if I set it to 4, now I have a little wiggle room between 4 and 5 for other programs. And if you're running things like Bluebeam, you know, Bentley products, you're running Adobe Acrobat, the full Adobe Acrobat, you're running anything that's graphics intensive, it's going to need some of that video card. And if you're in 2025 and are having some weird font display issues, turn off the accelerated font display. With that, what I mean is that you start seeing unusual characters or you see double characters, ghosting behind characters, things like that. That's typically a function of 25 where the accelerated font display just needs to be turned off. And typically I'll turn off all of the 3D display settings unless I'm doing 3D with lighting, shading, and materials. Reason why I turn all of that off is if that is turned off, I'm not allocating any resources for it so I can focus entirely on 2D. So there's another little tweak down here at the bottom is if AutoCAD is struggling or if you're having strange issues, i.e. you pan and zoom and things disappear until you do regen all, you're having some really strange graphics behaviors where things are constantly disappearing off your screen until you do a regen all, type in GFX DX12, set that to 0, restart AutoCAD, and what that will do is it will change AutoCAD from using DirectX 12 to DirectX 11. Is there a way to make the graphics tweaks without visiting every computer? Unfortunately, no. And these are all machine specific. And the only place you could do that is with a registry change because all of this information is buried in the registry. And if the video cards are not identical as far as driver, version, type, things like that, we can't make any of those settings that way. So one of the things that I have found, especially, is that DirectX 11 is far more stable, especially on Windows 11 machines. So if you're on Windows 11 and you're having some specific issues with display, things just not seeming to be right, things like that, DirectX 11 I found to be a lot more stable. Have you seen issues getting the graphics driver from NVIDIA AMD rather than the computer hardware maker like HP? I have not. I usually prefer to go to NVIDIA and AMD. Yep, the GFX DX12 will help line types appear continuous when they're not. There's another webinar I did specifically about line types and understanding MSLT scale, PSLT scale, line type scale, why things don't necessarily come correct, Justine. But yes, GFX DX12 and changing back to DirectX 11 does help improve some of those things. Again, visual issues is where we go back to DirectX 11. With that, I'm going to show you, yes, this also applies to 2023, Justine. So if we go to my AutoCAD, right, and I go, actually, we'll start over here. I'm going to go here. I'll go to Device Manager. Right, and in my Device Manager, you'll see I have my display adapter. I have my RTX A1000 6 gig. I'll double click on it. I'll right mouse click, or I could right mouse click and go to Properties. I go to the driver tab, and you're going to see that I updated this driver 111 of 2025. So my driver is just about a little over a month old. I'm okay with that. I've gotten on many machines where I see drivers dating back to 22, 21, 20. We update the graphics driver, and there's a noticeable improvement in the problems. And then in here, we go graphics config, and you'll see I'm running DirectX 12. I have all of these things turned off. I do leave my accelerated font display on because I don't need it. I'm not experiencing any issues, but I have some drawing files where I can see issues. And then my video memory caching level is set to 4. And it says right here, a larger value will have better performance unless other applications are also using video memory. That's why we want to give other applications this little bit of wiggle room. Pretty much it for that. Oh, actually, we can probably talk about that too. So I will go to nvidia.com, right? So if you're NVIDIA card, you go here, you go to drivers, right? And there's manual driver search here, right? And I'll select that I'm running NVIDIA Quattro. I'm on an RTX series. I'm on a notebook machine. I can come down here and find my RTX 6 gig. I'm running Windows 11, and I'll hit find. And it's going to come back and tell me that there's a new driver, I think dated 26th, right? 27th of February. So then I'd click view, and then I would go ahead and download this and install this. AMD is very similar, right? You go AMD.com. Yeah, I got to accept cookies. Go to resources and support. Go to drivers. Right, and these guys are actually pretty good. They have an auto detect here, or you can manually search for it. You can go graphics. You can say it's a Radeon Pro. It's a W5 mobile series. What are the recommended settings changes inside the NVIDIA control panel? All right, if video memory caching is grayed out, what does that mean? That either means you don't have hardware acceleration turned on, or it is defaulting to a card that doesn't have anything. Typically what that means. What are the recommended settings inside the NVIDIA control panel? That is an excellent question. So let's talk about that. So if I go to my NVIDIA control panel, I'll tell you the only thing I actually change in mine, as soon as it comes up, the only thing I ever come in here and change is I'll go to the physics configuration and I'll force it to always use this instead of auto select or CPU. I'll tell it to always use this. That's the only change I make inside this. That's the only change I've had to make. Good questions. All right, move on. One of the other things is that if you're experiencing a significant number of crashes or you have some behavioral issues, things like that, one of the things we like to do is make sure that your AutoCAD is updated to the, AutoCAD and or the verticals is updated to the latest update level. So we have two ways of doing that. So keeping AutoCAD updated helps keep it stable and working properly. Because again, there are things that occur. People submit bug reports to Autodesk, things like that. They come out with new updates to fix certain things, certain problems, things like that. And there's always two methods. You can use Autodesk Access and you must be signed in, or you can go to your Autodesk account. Autodesk Access, this is the easiest method. If you have administrator rights to do install, open the app and see if there are updates, and then just click on the update icon to update them. Pretty easy. Make sure you're signed in. Now, Autodesk Access, pardon me, sometimes does not necessarily correctly install things, or it'll just tell you install failed. So sometimes we have to actually go to our Autodesk account because the update mechanism in Access fails. If you need IT or administrators, an administrator to install them because you don't have rights, we go to your Autodesk account to retrieve them. And then we go to manage.autodesk.com. At the top of the screen, you'll select all products and services. Locate your product, click view details. Once the product is open, select the year you want to update. And then you have a few options depending on the product. So typically updates, extensions, plugins, and languages. Go to the updates tab, find those that say your product, like this says AutoCAD 2025.1.1 update. Click the download button, install it. And that's pretty easy to do. And yes, you can go into System, Setting, Display, Graphics. Under the custom options for the app, you can add AutoCAD and set it to use the higher end graphics card if you have multiple video cards. Now, if you're running a desktop system, that's usually not necessary because the desktop system should have your monitors plugged into the good card. If you're on a laptop, like I'm on a laptop, you'll see that I have no traces of the Intel. I actually went into the BIOS and disabled the Intel card, so I am always running the NVIDIA graphics, and it doesn't even know that I have an Intel UHD installed. Sometimes you can do that, Ryan, so that's an idea. Again, we come into all products and services. I'm going to wait for this to come up and update. All right, come on. There you go. We click view details. If I'm in 25, I'm going to come here and I'm going to go ahead and I can just click the download here. If you're always curious to know what's going on or what's been changed, you can always hover over this and click on the release notes. It'll actually come up and open up a release notes page, and it'll tell you what's been fixed in this update. It'll say occasional crashes when inputting special content, occasional crashes when switching hardware acceleration on or off, or if any text is created in the new drawing, any features that rely on DirectX 12, right, DirectX 11. Occasional crashes when changing a nested block into freeze in a current viewport, things like that. So you can always see what's been changed. So Autodesk Access, somebody wants to know the difference between Autodesk Access and going to the manage.autodesk.com URL. So Access is a piece of software that's installed on your machine when you install the software. That is one method of getting there. The manage.autodesk.com is for doing manual downloads of the updates, or if you have multiple machines you need to update, you only have to do the downloads once. You can save them to your network drive and run them on other machines. The best way to block update notifications with Autodesk applications on clients' machines, that's pretty easy, Robert. There's actually an Autodesk article on that where you change a registry key flag. You'd have to use a group policy or a login script to change the registry key, and they will never see they will see notifications, but they will not see the ability to download anything or install anything. That's the best. Is there a good method for pushing updates to multiple machines? There's not a really good methodology for that. You'll need to either write a group policy or a login script or manually do it. That's the best I can tell you at this point. If you run deployments, you can update the deployment and rerun the deployment on a user's machine. It'll skip all the pieces that are already installed and just install the update. We're just motoring right along. Let's see. What's the best way to keep up with the influx of updates? So many to follow. Typically, I know that there's multiple updates. You get notifications that there are multiple updates. I typically don't worry about updates at a microscopic level. I usually worry about it quarterly. So every 2 to 3 months, I'll go into my Autodesk account and I will see what's new since the last time I checked. And those are the ones that I'll focus on. And then I usually go in and start looking at what's changed, what's been fixed, things like that. Unless somebody has a specific issue that they say, I keep trying to do this and it keeps failing, then I'll double check and see if there's a newer update and does that update specify that that's a problem that's been fixed. So I usually try to keep tabs on it. They used to have a notification. Autodesk years ago used to email you. You could sign up for an email. So anytime there was an update released, you'd get an email letting you know. They stopped doing that like 3-4 years ago. I think I covered everyone. So let's talk about some common things to speed up AutoCAD. And this again does apply to verticals. So there's a few things we can set in AutoCAD to improve overall performance. So the first thing is setting layout regen control or layout regen CTL to 0. So what this will do is this will force a regen every time a tab is changed, either to go to the model tab or any of the layout tabs. This helps significantly when you have multiple drawing files open, so AutoCAD is only holding on to the data in the tab you're currently in. When you have this set to 2 and you have a file with multiple tabs across the bottom, any change you make now has to be pushed to all the other tabs. So if you draw a line in a viewport and that line shows up everywhere else, it's got to update. And the more drawings you open, the significant decrease in overall AutoCAD performance you will immediately see. So typically I go layout regen control 0 and just accept that's what it needs to be. So when you're switching from model space to paper space tab, there will be a slight delay, but your overall improvement in CAD gets significantly better. Selection preview, I generally like that at 2 or 0. My personal is 0. This prevents your cursor from highlighting objects when no command is active, which is 2, or never, which is 0. Very useful to turn off if you have hatching that keeps freezing your machine when you touch it. Does this apply when using sheet sets? Yes. Well, layout regen control 0, if it's set to 0 and you're publishing a sheet set in the background, it will help performance on publishing a sheet set in the background, provided you're using the same profile. And I wrote a Imagine It blog specifically on issues with sheet sets and publishing in the background if things are coming out in color or it's telling you it can't find stuff. So selection preview, again, I like 0, but 2 is usually what I recommend so that when you're just moving your mouse across the screen, nothing's trying to highlight. So if you've ever noticed that when it's set to the default of 3 and you touch an XREF, if it's a really complex XREF, your machine's going to hang up while it tries to visually pop a visual cue that you're on the XREF, and then at some point it'll come right back and then your mouse has already moved off of it, things like that. That drives me crazy, so I turn it off. That's 2. Or I never have it on, so it never notices. That's 0. Setting VT enabled to 0. This controls when smooth transitions are used for animated zoom and pan. Setting it to 0 turns that off. In other words, it's less resources used. It just, you zoom with the wheel mouse in clicks. So it's just a one wheel click and you'll see everything just move. It's not animated or cartoony is the best way I can describe that. So I typically like that. Setting cursor badge to 1 turns off all of the funny little cursor badges for area, copy, distance, erase, ID, list, mask, props, measure, geometry, move, rotate, scale, trim, and zoom. Again, every time AutoCAD has to put up something on the screen, it's using memory, visual memory, graphics card memory. We want to turn off as much of that as we can, because the more we turn off, the better AutoCAD performs, which is what most of these are doing. If you're like me and you type in a lot of commands and notice that letters go missing or it's invoking the wrong command because multiple letters have gone missing, things like that, type in minus input search options, then set D for the delay and set that from the default of 0.3 seconds to something larger. I like 1.5. That means if I start to type, the autocomplete will trigger only after waiting 1.5 seconds, which is usually enough to type what I want without missing letters. VT options, that's entirely up to you. I just like VT enable 0. That's the one I work with. VT options should actually bring up a dialog box. Right, so VT options brings up a dialog box. If I turn both of those off, that's 0. That's VT option or VT enable 0. So nothing else applies. Dynamic input. This can cause some significant performance issues in large or very complex drawings, or if your machine is already struggling. You can type in DYN mode and set that to the negative of the value listed. So if DYN mode is 4, set it to -4. You can also turn it off via the command line buttons. If you don't see it, click the little quote unquote hamburger on the lower right hand corner of your Autodesk screen, toggle dynamic input on, and you can turn it on or off from here. Dynamic input has its place. I generally don't run with it on because I have noticed in drawings that I'm already struggling in, it complicates everything and triggers other issues, really slow command behavior, slow snapping, jumping of cursor, things like that. So these are just the things that I like to do to speed up AutoCAD. And then some other things we can do. Go into your options, go to the display tab and turn off the display paper shadow. Now this is a huge resource hog. What it's actually doing is where you see the paper size shown in the layout tab, and then you have the different color background, there will be a faint gray haze as a shadow around that paper. I have drawings, or I have run into drawings that trying to go into a paper space tab that has some complex information will crash AutoCAD unless I turn off the display paper shadow. As soon as I turn off the display paper shadow, I can get into that tab without crashing. Can these be set across the network via group policy or Intune? Most of these can. So, right, layout regen control, selection preview, VT enable, cursor badge, input search options, and even DYN mode. All of these could be set by a startup list like ACAD or acad.doc.lsp. You could force them, if you wanted to enforce a group policy, you could be changing the registry keys that point to those specific things, because these are all registry based. The paper shadow is only available either manually through here or it's a registry push. where you'd have to change a specific key in the registry to turn that off. If you have an ARG file, so for example, you're running a custom AutoCAD profile or a custom Civil 3D profile, turn all of this stuff off in the profile before you export the ARG, and it will bring all of that same information across, with the exception of the graphics config, because that's individual machine. Yes, I'll show the paper shadow. Right. So first things first, I'm going to go into options. And I'm going to go, and I got to go change my sheet model back to white. I got to turn all this back on. So if I'm in here, it's really hard to see, but there is just a faint gray shadow where this blends, because this is not crisp. There's just this little faint gray haze right here, and it's a huge resource hog. Go into my options, I'll turn that off, and I'll hit apply. And you'll see that faint gray haze disappeared right here, and now I have a crisp transition line. That little bit of gray haze is a huge resource hog on your video card. And I can't stress enough how important it is to just turn that off. And honestly, nobody ever sees it. Nobody ever pays attention to it. And I'm old school. I like everything black. That's just me. Right, and when we're talking about, right, so in options, under system, this is this layout regen options, this is the layout regen control. We can turn that off right here. So this is 0, this is 1, this is 2. I usually like it 0, but we're regen when switching layouts. Yeah, full screen crosshairs, gotta love them. Right, so when I go to VT enable, it's set to 3. I set that to 0, and now if I'm in here, it's jumpy instead of cartoony. It zooms in and out on an increment, very smooth. See, that's VT enable. Cursor badge is normally 2. I like 1, so if I do a distance, you'll see that I don't have a little magnifying glass or anything next to my crosshairs. All right, let's go back to 2. And you'll see that the little question mark. I hate things near my crosshairs because it gets in my way. So I like to turn off as much of that as I can. You'll notice when I'm hovering over this, it is popping up because I have not set selection preview. It's currently set to the default of 3. I normally like it to be 2. So you'll see that this does not change at all when I hover over it. Now, if I start a command like erase, you'll see it change. That's that selection preview. If I take preview and I change that to 0, which is my preferred, I'll go to erase and it will still do that. Or if I'm in a line command, actually it's a move command, you'll see that it doesn't highlight when I'm in a move command. But if I turn on selection preview again and I go move, you'll see it highlight. Again, these are just little visual clues that Autodesk has, but understand every visual clue you get on your screen has an impact in performance. So we want to try and take out as much as we can without creating a situation where now we have to work harder, but we want to eliminate all the little bits and pieces and bells and whistles and the other nonsense so that we can work in a CAD environment that is streamlined as much as possible. Right, and that minus input search options, this is the big one. Like my delay is still 0.3 here. I like to set my delay at 1.5. So now when I type the word line, it'll wait 1.5 seconds before it tries to give me the autocomplete. Because I do a lot of keyboard typing of commands, and it will skip letters, because as soon as you type that first letter, it'll wait 0.3 of a second and then try to and when it triggers the autocomplete, it'll cause you to skip 1, 2, and I've seen as many as 3 letters while it's trying to bring that up. And now the command you're trying to type in doesn't make sense. So those are the typical things. Any questions? You guys have had some really good questions so far. All right, let's talk about some of the other things that happen, especially after crashes. Command line disappears, file dialog box is missing, and other tips. So if the command line disappears, just type in command line or hit the control key plus the 9, it'll bring it back. You can always close it. Most common things that get reset after an error or a significant crash, file DIA gets set to 0. You just type start a blank new drawing, just to hit enter through all the prompts. And then type in file DIA, set that back to 1. Make sure command DIA and ATT DIA are all set back to 1. If you prefer the classic style of hatch dialog and do not want to use the ribbon, type in HP DLG mode and set that to 1. I don't personally like the ribbon. I like the dialog box. If you like the classic layer dialog box and not the layer palette, again, type in classic layer. For the classic array box that's not dynamic or ribbon based, you just type in array classic. If you are in I think it's 24 and 25, maybe even 23, I think it's 24 and 25. If you don't like the trim extend where everything suddenly is now an object and you're randomly erasing things or randomly trimming things that you're wanting to find a boundary for and then trim to that boundary, type in trim extend mode, set that to 0. If you like the classic insert dialog box, type in classic insert. If you do a lot of running O snaps and you find that you're grabbing Z elevations from objects that are elevated, set O snap Z to 1. So basically type in O snap Z and set it to 1. The important thing about this particular command is this one is not saved and must be set each time you open AutoCAD. Yes, Beru dash insert or dash array does work, but those are command line driven. So now here's a cute one. For finding a specific command in the ribbon, type in find UI and hit enter. Enter the command name in like break and hit enter. And it will ask consider ID entered as context ID. Just hit enter here and you'll see a little arrow showing where it is in the ribbon. With a little hit and miss, you can find what you're looking for if you don't exactly know what you're looking for. Note, in Teams, I cannot share my screen and have it correctly work. I've not tested it here, so we're going to try this one. So in here, I'm going to type in find UI. And I'm going to type in break. Just like that. It works. Tells me right where to find break. This works in verticals too. This one's clever, right? It's Array Classic. Array Classic brings up your old style array box, right? Classic Layer brings up your old style classic layer box. Is there a command to open the classic floating toolbars versus the ribbon? I did cover that in the webinar, but you want to turn on toolbars. First thing to do is type in menu bar, set that to 1, like I already have it up here. You can go to Tools, Toolbars, AutoCAD, and I can turn on layers. Now I have my layer toolbar back. That's how we do that. Let's see, classic insert. This is the old style classic insert dialog box versus the block palette. Again, these are all personal preference based. I'm just saying that we have options for other things if you like some of the classic stuff. Like right now, I believe my trim, it asked me to, and you'll see my trim extend mode is set to 1. So it's looking at everything on my screen as a trim plane. Understand if you have a massive amount of geometry, this is going to be nearly crippling. I have some files that have 32 million polyline objects in them. And if I don't change trim extend mode to 0 and I launch the trim command, the drawing crashes. There's just too many objects. All right, so trim extend mode, we set that to 0. And now it's going to ask me to select this, and now I can trim this, or I can hold down the shift key and go back to the classic behaviors. Right? So when I go to hatch, and I'll just erase this, and I go back to hatch, and you'll see that this is just ribbon-driven hatch, which I don't particularly care for. I'll type in HBDLG mode, and I'll set that back to 1. And now when I start the hatch command, it brings up my classic hatch dialog box, where again, I have all of the pieces in one spot. I can see it. Yes, this webinar will be recorded and shared to all the attendees. I think that covers all of that. Wow, we're really moving on. I've got my bonus slides to cover. Let's see if we can get through them fairly quick. So drawing, maintenance, and cleanup, this is the big one. So when starting a new drawing, the best workflow is to always start by using the new command and selecting a company standard template or a standard template. Workflow that you should always avoid is opening an old project drawing file and doing a save as and deleting things that are not needed. The reason why is it reduces the number of errors of drawing, reduces rework, reduces problems, starts with a clean slate, fewer issues overall later in the project, make sure there's not connections to older projects, and helps keep the file size down. Even if you erase everything, there can be remnants and other garbage left over in the AutoCAD DWG database that can trigger other issues later on. I generally tell people never start with an old drawing and erase everything and assume that it's going to be a safe drawing to use. And typically this is what I say to people, or I actually have a blog on this, but before you start any file from an external source, from a client, a business partner, etc., take time to clean that drawing before you put it into one of your projects as an XREF. It only takes a few minutes and it will save you a lot of frustration later on down the road. Make a copy of it so we're not contaminating, the original drawing that was sent. Open AutoCAD, run recover on the drawing. Once opened and recovered, type in purge everything out of the drawing you can. Then do minus purge with a minus sign. This is the only way you can get to where the registered applications are. So you'll do minus purge, type in RE for regapps, hit enter at this prompt, select no at this prompt. Normally you should have 20 or less. If this gets large, it will significantly impact drawing performance. And I've seen issues. Yeah. Hang on just a second. Yeah, let me put that one in the group chat. Boom. Then open up the XREF palette, detach any unloaded or unreferenced XREF. So if it says not found, detach it. If it says unreferenced, detach it. I typically also recommend changing any found and loaded attached XREFs to overlays to make sure they don't end up with circular references and not to drag XREFs into files where they're not needed. So you just come in here, right mouse click on that, change it to overlay. Another step, which is an optional one, is to run overkill on the command line on the entire drawing, remove any duplicates. Have you tried the new drawing clean tool Autodesk has in beta? I can neither confirm nor deny that I have used it because it's in beta, which means we're covered under an NDA and an end user license agreement, which means we can't talk about it till it's been released to the wild. So Just something to be aware of, Seth. You can use the change command and change the color of all objects to by layer. This will help make sure that when it's used as an XREF that you can manipulate the colors properly. This is a big one. Type in XREF regap CTL, set that to 1. It's a system variable. This way you prevent registered applications from your XREFs going into the drawings you're XREFing them into. There are times when I cannot remove an unreferenced XREF. There may be something holding on to it. It could be part of a block definition, things like that. We can discuss how to change that or figure out where it's coming from. There's some ways we can possibly do that. The process outlined above should ensure that the drawing you're using as an XREF is as clean as you can make it to help prevent introducing issues into your drawings. Sometimes the problems you have in your drawings can be due to the XREF files, not the current drawing. Always go into the XREFs, clean them up, reload the XREF in the original file. In some cases, I have had to detach the XREF, clean it, purge the drawing that you're trying to XREF it into, and then reattach the XREF in order to clear problems. Let's see. If you see that your computer is having a hard time and is running and looks like it's going to crash, can you exit out of the current command before it's going to crash so you don't lose what you've done and back just before that command? Generally not. If AutoCAD is going to crash and it shows unresponsive or not responding in Task Manager, you're going to either have to wait or kill it. How can I find a style referenced layer so I can delete that layer? You're talking about Civil 3D and you're going to have to hunt for it. There's no magic button for that. XREF regap control is a system variable. So once it is set on the system, it will function that way for all drawings. It's not drawing based. A couple of other things here because I have 5 more minutes. These are important things. If you encounter an ACDB spatial index error when recovering a file, you're going to have to W block out the file. This is an unrecoverable error, period. That means that the database and how it's handling the spatial indexing is completely corrupt, and this drawing is going to continue to be problematic until it's fixed. So typically what you do, W block out, allows you to save out selected objects or the whole drawing into a fresh uncompromised drawing. It can be used to fix a corrupt drawing that's crashing or freezing. Type in W block, hit enter. This dialog box will appear and there are many options, and I'm going to show you what it is. Always include map information when prompted if it is. So if you W block out the entire drawing, here's what you need to know. Layout tabs are included. So if you have a drawing that you have all of your layout tabs set to, W block out the entire drawing is the best place to start. It will only grab the Civil 3D styles that are in use or the Civil 3D styles that are set as default. You will lose object layers in Civil 3D. It will keep design coordinate zones. It will generally only keep any of the text styles and dimension styles and multi-leader styles that are actually in use, and same with line types. It's going to dump all the data that's not actually used. And then after I've W blocked out the drawing, I'll run recover on the drawing that I just W blocked out. If you W block out only selected geometry, layout tabs are not included. Again, only grab the Civil 3D styles that are in use. Object layers. If you have pressure network, it's going to break the pipe run alignment and revert it to a parts-based network. And sometimes gravity or pressure network items will not be W blocked into the new drawing. Okay. So I want to show you that just so you can see what ACDB spatial index. So I'm going to run recover, because I actually happen to have a drawing that I can show this to you. It's going to come in here, and it's going to tell you it found one item and fixed one item. And if we come in here, you'll see ACDB spatial index. This drawing is permanently corrupt. If you continue to work in this drawing without fixing it, the problem is going to get worse and worse. Okay, I just wanted to show that one to you because I know we're running out of time. So some of the other things, when opening a drawing, you see a dialog box that one or more SHX files are missing, right? As you just saw that when do I have a best practice for the autosave settings? Usually I just leave it at 10. Unless I'm dealing with very large drawings, then I'll set it to 20. That's really the best practice. I typically will reroute all my autosaves to a specific folder rather than have it buried in the temp folder, so I can blow away the temp folder regularly without affecting any of my back autosaves. And Paul, you and I can have a conversation about that later. So if you get the dialog box that says one or more SHX files are missing, determine is it a text style or a line type style. For text styles, open the text style editor. Navigate through each text style here until you identify the missing one. You'll see a little, this isn't, basically it says working SHX doesn't exist, replace it with something else. Save the file, close it, reopen it, this should go away. If it's a line type shape, in other words, it's a shape file that's used in a line type, you'll need to use the purge dialog. So you'll go to the purge dialog, you'll click find non-purgeable items. You'll come down into the shapes and it'll tell you what SHXs are in use and what line types they are. And in this case, replace it with the line type that's going to work best for you. And then you should be able to purge out that SHX and get rid of it. And I am right upon 9:59, so I still have some time to take a few other questions. What type of AI help is available? Is this a feasible way to find out about commands, drawing, setup workflows? I'll be honest with you, Todd, I don't know. And the reason why I don't know is that everybody's industry is different on workflows and things like that. And that's workflows, how you're currently set up, things like that. I suppose if you fed enough information into, the AI like Copilot, it might be able to give you some of that. But that's the best way. Is there an easier way to remove CAD applications instead of manually uninstalling them one by one? Is there a tool that just I could run and removes it all so I don't have to go through and manually? All right, so the uninstall tool is no longer available, right? They killed that in 22, so all the 23 and newer software all use the new ODIS installer, which means everything's there. Now, there is a couple of things. It's not necessarily, well, I'm going to say it's not necessarily as difficult. It's definitely not an all-in-one. But if you'll hang on just a second, let me drag this over here. So if you go to Program Data, and if you go to Autodesk, and if you go all the way down to the bottom to Uninstallers, right here are all the uninstallers. So, and this is what I call scorched earth. So if I uninstall Civil 3D 2025, it's also going to uninstall Map 3D pieces and AutoCAD pieces because Civil 3D is built on top of Map 3D, which is built on top of AutoCAD. It's also going to strip all the licensing, the identity manager, a large number of items get stripped with that. So you come in here and you can click the ADSK uninstall helper. This will help get rid of most of it. And this is a lot faster than going through control panel. That's really the best way. If you are a client of ours, we have a couple of guys here that can help build specific uninstall scripts to help you do a mass uninstall. If you're looking to uninstall older software on a machine, they can help build you something that can do that.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, everybody. Thank you so much for a great weekend. Thanks, Ryan.
Have a great weekend, guys. Thank you.